Good evening. I'm Scott Meyer, lead minister for the Western Hills Church, and I grow and learn together. Tonight's very special. Tonight, you get to hear a critical conversation between two ladies and Tia Williams from the Avenue G Church of Christ. And a black woman describing their different perspectives and what it means to have racial reconciliation in this world today. And this is a very critical. I believe is that as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we ought to be able to talk to one another. And in that way, we can become a model to be a people of peace and healing in this world. Thank you for tuning in. This is an important conversation. We're dedicated to bringing together all of God's children. And so you're going to be blessed by these two ladies and Tia. Ladies.
Thanks, Scott. Yes, I'm here with Tia.
Hello.
Good to see you, and so
glad
that you came and joined us tonight, because we've been kind of talking. Well, we haven't been actually talking. We've been messaging back and forth, and talking about the possibility of getting together and just having a conversation. So it's just kind of woman to woman, girl to girl. We want to really stretch it.
Right.
We can do that.
Sister to sister.
Sister to sister. Absolutely, sister to sister. Yeah. So Tia and I are as aware as anybody that everything in this country is really volatile right now.
Right.
And so what we want to do is to address some of the questions that white people have of black people, that black people have of white people, and how we can just come to be able to communicate. Because I think both of us agree there's one thing that will solve all of this. And that one thing is to be able to talk to each other.
That's right.
And to talk to each other with love.
Right.
As opposed to hate.
Exactly.
Because we've seen plenty of that.
Absolutely.
We don't see that anymore. Also, Tia's going to tell us a little bit about her and about her family, so you can kind of get a feel for where she's coming from. You may not notice this on camera, but I think you might. I'm considerably older than she is, so I am of a different generation. So we're going to kind of share who we are first, and then thinking about the fact that she's of a very different generation than I am, and so she's grown up in a different situation than I grew up. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hopefully everybody knows me by now, but my name is Shatia Williams. I'm married to Joshua Williams, the one that sings all the time and won't hush sometimes. And then I have 5 beautiful kids. My oldest, Kendon.
5?
Yes, Kendon, and he's 13. My daughter is Kiera, my oldest daughter. She's 11. And my twins, Jaden and Jordan. And of course, I'm pretty sure y'all seen them running around when we come visit, as well as my young one, Landon, and he's 4. So, yeah, I stay pretty busy, and that's my life right there.
That's it right
Running
there.
and going to work. And
Okay, speaking of work, where do you work and what do you do?
Okay, well, I'm a nurse at the VA. I've been there for almost 9 years. I just graduated with my bachelor's in nursing. Yay! Yay,
and that's a big congratulations. There was a big celebration about that.
Yes, but I've been at LVN for 9 years, and that's where I work. I've always been, I worked at Skyway for a little bit, but I've been at the VA for 9 years.
And the thing, too, you need to know about Tia and me is that her reference, when we all get together, is, for those of you who don't go to Western Hills and who don't go to Avenue G, every now and then we manage to get together and we worship together, which is a wonderful experience.
Yes, it is.
It energizes us really quiet, shy, white people who just are just so energized by the enthusiasm. And her particular congregation is a congregation that loves to sing.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And they'll sing at the drop of a hat, and we're so glad. We're so glad when they do that. So that's kind of how our relationship began. We're still very much in the process of building relationships there.
Right.
But I have to tell you that my dressing recipe has gotten much better
Oh.
because your mom shared her dressing
Oh, did
recipe
she?
with a friend of mine, and then it got passed on to me.
Awesome,
So
awesome.
see, there are all sorts of benefits.
I just made her cook that Sunday.
Did
I
you?
said you need to bring it over to the house.
It's really good stuff. It's
Yes.
really good stuff. So we're just kind of beginning to get to know one another.
Mhm.
Now, I've been around Western Hills for over 30 years
Mhm.
in this one congregation, and it's been a wonderful 30 years. I really feel family,
Mhm.
you know, because I've watched generations come, I've watched generations go,
Mhm.
and have just come to love the family at Western Hills. One of the really wonderful things about Western Hills is that we're multi-generational.
Mhm.
There are a lot of us who have gray hair, and I know mine doesn't look that way, but you know how that happens. And there are young families with little bitty kids. What's really interesting is that the young man who is now our preaching intern this summer, I watched him grow up at
Oh,
Western
that's
Hills.
awesome.
So
That's awesome.
it's really been wonderful over the years to do that. Professionally, I've done radio, I've done some TV,
Mhm.
I've had my own little video production company for a while, so I've kind of been in the media business.
Mhm.
Was a telephone operator at one time.
Oh,
So
see, I didn't know that one.
yeah. Not many people know that was a long time ago. That was in another galaxy. So what we wanted to do tonight was just to get together and talk one-to-one.
Mhm.
And so I used as a resource my daughter and a mutual friend of ours, Becca, and my daughter-in-law, who, when I said, do you have anything you'd like to say or ask Tia, there was not a moment's hesitation. So they are of different generations, are just as interested in this as we are.
Right.
So with that said, I also have 4 grandkids. I have 2 kids and 4 grandkids. And I was telling her that, of course, my kids are all grown, obviously. I have one in the 50s and one in the 40s in the age range. And so my concern now, I've always been concerned about my kids' safety, but my concern now I've realized is even more focused on my grandkids than it is on my kids. So I think my grandkids are kind of somewhat, they're a little bit older than your kids are, but I've been around them as they were growing up. And so my sense of concern about their safety, even as young adults, I have that concern. So as a mom and a grandmom, pretty convinced that my concern for safety is defined in a very different way than yours is.
Right.
So tell us something about that.
Just being a mother, especially an African American, is hard. And as my kids get older, sometimes it's kind of scary, and especially when you see those videos and things of that nature. Matter of fact, I don't even watch the videos anymore, but it's kind of scary because my oldest is getting older, and he's not looking like a boy anymore. He's looking more like a man, and you know, as a mother, I say, "Oh, my handsome young man," and just knowing that sometimes some people can see him and maybe think, oh, you know, that he's a threat to me, or I fear for that because I don't want that to happen to my child. So in a way, it's kind of like I'm happy that they're growing and they're thriving, but in a way, it's kind of a scary time, especially with him entering. He's a teenager now, and I know he's going to be wanting to drive soon. So even trying to have that conversation with him driving, you know, like my parents did with us. I think Chris had talked about that a little bit whenever
Go
y'all
ahead
had that.
Go ahead and talk about that again, because we may have some people watching who didn't see Chris.
Well, my parents, even though it was more directed towards the boys in our family, but it was mentioned to me as well, you know, make sure when you're pulled over, you know, make sure you pull off. Make sure your hands is visible before they come. Make sure you already have your driver's license, everything out, because you don't want to seem like you're trying to reach for anything like a gun or something. And, you know, so I was always taught to make sure you have everything out. make sure your hands are visible, you know, things of that nature. So that's one thing we had to grow up in doing. But it seems like now, you know, we're seeing videos of people saying, hey, you know, I have a gun, it's registered, and then they're still feeling like it's a threat with them even saying that. That's scary to me. So a lot of praying lately for my kids lately. And yeah, it's difficult times right now.
Yeah, we've had, and I think Scott Meyer referenced this too. You know, as moms, we sit down and we have the conversation about the birds and the bees. But pretty much, as a white woman with my kids, I don't have that conversation because that is a very definite, scary possibility for you.
Right.
And so you have to do everything you possibly can in order to make that less volatile, I guess. Try to keep it just as calm as you can.
And then also, like, even with how he dresses, you know, teenagers, they want to have their hoodies and stuff on, and I'm like, Kendon, you can't always wear stuff like that because, yeah, I know you're a good kid, but you may be presenting to a way where they be like, oh, you're dressed like a thug or something like. So sometimes he probably like, oh, mom, you know, like I'm annoying. But I have to tell him, you know, you have to dress a certain way. You have to make sure you present yourself in a way that's, you know, not, you know, coming off like that. So that's another thing I have to explain to him as well. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't think much about that.
Yeah.
You know, our kids put their shorts and their t-shirts on and their hoodies and go out, and it's not that big a deal.
Right.
Well, one of the things that my daughter wanted to ask you about is about how you and your family may have experienced discrimination.
Okay.
So tell us about that.
For myself, there's one instance where I was very dressed up because anybody know me, they know I love to put my makeup on and dress pretty. And when I do dress up or whatnot, I like to go shopping. That's my retail therapy. So when I was going, you know, I never had any issues or anything like that. And then I think I needed to run in one day, and that may have been a sweats day. I had my sweats and my t-shirt on and just kind of relaxed or whatever. And I noticed that, you know, this associate in the store was like following me. And then I finally just turned around. I was like, can I help you? Oh, no, I'm just working. I'm like, okay. I said, but you're following me. I'm just doing my job. I'm just like, really? So I just left the store and I never went back. So that experience right there, that's just one example. It bothered me. And then there's one instance where my husband is one day we was actually attending Cameron Church of Christ. So we was going through some small towns, and the police had pulled us over. And I was like, were you speeding? He was like, no. And so we pulled over. At the time, the twins were newborns in the car. And he was like, I need you to get out the car. And so it scared me for that. And so he just looked at me, and I was just like, just go, you know. And they had him outside, and they were asking him questions and, you know, standing at the back of the car. And the whole time my heart is just beating because I didn't know what could happen. And then they was like, oh, okay, well, I was just checking, you know, just making sure, you know, it was nothing wrong. And I mean, we wasn't speeding. It was nothing. So it was like, and I know he was angry the whole way to church because he was like, was that even necessary? So with that instance with my husband, and as far as my kids, nothing has really happened until this year. Like I said, my son is starting to look more like a man. And he was riding a bus, and every day he was like, Mama, the bus driver keeps checking my backpack. And I'm like, okay, so is he checking all your backpacks? He's like, no. And so I went and I talked to the principal, and the principal was saying, oh, well, he's been also getting referrals, and that's not like my son either. So I was like, well, what's going on, you know? And I asked him because I know my kids, and I know sometimes they're, So I said, what's going on? And he's like, Mom, I did not do anything. And as moms, we know when our kids are lying because he does the little stare thing. But he was like really hurt. He was like, Mama, I didn't do anything. And so the principal went to the extent, because he know Kendon too. He said, it doesn't sound like Kendon. So he got the video and watched the days of the referrals. And he see my son sitting there just riding home, sitting there just riding to school. And so we had a meeting with the individual, and he just like, well, I didn't do it. And then all the kids in the school bus already had said that he did. And so his boss was saying, well, I apologize. I said, well, I understand that I don't want you to apologize. I said, you should apologize to him because, he doesn't really understand what's going on. So he had like this smirk on his face. And I was just like, are you serious? He's like 13. Why would you, pick on my son, And it was very hurtful to, I go through it, but I don't want my kids to have to deal with that. And so I just eventually just have to just take them off the bus. But that's just a couple of instances of that.
Yeah, it's kind of like you can mess with me.
Yeah.
Don't be messing with my kids. All moms know exactly how that feels. Whatever your color, I think.
Right.
You don't want your kids to have to go through something like that.
Right.
That is totally unfounded.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really tough. One of the other things that Angie wanted to know is how do we help ourselves, being white people, how do we help ourselves really recognize when you are being discriminated against?
Yeah.
And this came because my daughter is married to a Hispanic person, my wonderful son-in-law, and she was just not really realizing when those things were happening to him. And so I think sometimes we're just not aware. And I think one of the things we need to be prepared to do as white people is to interject ourselves in those situations. But if we don't see them, how are we going to do that?
Yeah. And it's important that, first of all, I just want to say that what you're doing right now is the first start, like having that conversation. And then also listen to understand and not to respond, because I have a lot of Caucasian friends, and they're like, well, I've never seen that happen. I've never, seen that, but of course you have it, but you if you actually talk to me and hear me, and, I think that's a start. Like, listen to other African Americans and their experiences. And, with me being here today, I'm speaking from my experience. I'm pretty sure there's been others that have experienced worse than me. But listen for understanding. And I think that would be a great start, versus, oh, well, I've been through that before, and I've experienced that too. Okay, you may have experienced that, but to that extent, probably not, So I think the listening to understand would be a great start, versus for ready to respond.
Ready to respond, yeah. It's kind of one of those things that people do when you're sick.
Oh, yeah.
And immediately, if you're sick, then they start telling you about their illness.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, no, not really. You don't.
Yeah.
And especially, I'm sick right now.
Yeah.
So there's a whole
I have the same symptom.
A whole different frame of reference.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So I think that's one of the difficult things is whether you're communicating, whoever you're communicating with, is listening to really hear what people are saying, or listening to what they're really saying. And what I've discovered lots of times is when people are talking to me, I am already in my brain
I'm guilty of that too.
What I'm going to say. So, brain, just shut up and listen. And not everything, this is something I learned from my husband. He said, not everything requires a response, Marsha. And I'm going, really? Okay, all right. I'll work on that, and I'm still working on that. We've only been married 50 years, but I'm still working on that one. So I think we just kind of need to open our eyes, close our mouths, and open our hearts to what is going on. I'm thinking about how the scripture in Philippians goes about Jesus. Though he was the Son of God, he came as a human being.
Yes.
And he didn't count himself as being better than anybody else.
Right.
His purpose was to serve.
That's right.
So I think if we can all, I just thought of something today that I think might be true. You can tell me whether or not you think this is true. But I'm thinking whether you believe in Jesus as the Son of God or not, pick up the Bible. Even then, the people who did not agree with him or necessarily believe in him said, he's a really good teacher.
Yeah.
And if you just look at it even from that point of view, I think there, excuse me, I think there are lessons that can be learned.
That's right.
That can be applied.
Oh, yeah.
And so listening, that definitely is a biggie. One of the things we wanted to address, too, was the fact that I am in a mostly white congregation, and so my experience is there.
Yeah.
So my question is, I guess, how can we as a white congregation help understand, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty here, the discrimination that exists, not only in communities, but it exists in churches, and how do we overcome that?
Yeah.
And how do we recognize it? Sometimes we just don't even.
Yeah. Well, I can honestly say, as far as your congregation, Western Hills, like, I mean, this is not the first time you guys have actually, reached out and tried to have understanding of racism. Was it last year that we came together? So, I mean, y'all have already been like trying to tear down those walls. So, I mean, y'all already are doing it. As far as recognizing like discrimination, like I said, just talk with someone, and then and once you kind of start talking with someone and actually hearing them, you'll actually start seeing, oh, that's what she was talking about, or that's what he was talking about, So I mean, just having that communication, and that works both ways. Like I feel that it's important that we also understand, Caucasians, Hispanics, their culture, everything. And that way we'll be able to understand it too, because they probably not going through the same thing as us, but it may be something to where we need to understand them as well, like you were saying with your son-in-law, I've heard of things like that, and I thought it was mostly with us, but to hear you say that, that's eye-opening. So I think it's important that we actually have that conversation so we can be able to recognize it, because sometimes we be in our own little bubble at times, and oh, that doesn't happen. I don't think that way, and we base it off of how we are, and yes, we are Christians, we're individuals, and we wouldn't do those things, but there are some people that are out there that do. So just being able to recognize it just by making sure that we conversate and understand, and then we can recognize it.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of across the board.
Yes.
kind of thing that needs to happen. We just need to be kind of more aware of what is going on. And you're right, man, it's really easy just to stay inside your little bubble. And with COVID-19, our bubbles have gotten even smaller.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's a challenge. That's a big challenge, too. I'm going to kind of go off of the racism thing for a little bit, because being a nurse, I know that you deal a lot every day, every hour, every moment with this COVID-19 thing. And so what is your take on that? Is it over?
No,
Do we need
it
to
is
just
not.
relax
No,
and
it's
don't
not.
worry about anything anymore?
Because, I go to stores and I see everybody walking without a mask, and I'm like, the nurse in me comes out also with the gloves. I'm like, don't wear gloves. Because let me just, since you said that, I'm going to go ahead and say this. When you wear gloves, if it is COVID-19 on whatever object is on the shelf, and once you touch that, you're going to probably touch something else. You're spreading it throughout the store. So my thing is, I usually keep, well, they have little wipes at the front. H-E-B does. I love H-E-B. And I go ahead and I grab me 2 wipes. I make sure I wipe off the cart, and I keep the one so when I check out, I can wipe a little bit, do that, and then also save it to wipe my cart, put it back in my wallet. But once you leave, wash your hands. But yeah, it's not over. Or your mask. Make sure you're social distancing.
It's still those things. That we were told at the very beginning, pretty much, I think.
Yes.
Wash your hands a lot.
Yes.
Don't touch your face.
Please don't.
Don't touch your face. Don't wear your gloves, but do wear your mask.
Yes.
And just kind of use your common sense.
Oh, yes.
I think one of the staying 6 feet apart is difficult.
It is. Especially like if you are around individuals, it's okay to. Well, I won't just. This is Tia's perspective. As far as family wise, you're good, or if you've been around a certain family and it's just y'all, it's okay. But as far as going outside and hanging out with somebody that's been somewhere else, don't do that.
Don't go there. Just don't go there.
Yeah.
Because we have seen spikes.
Yeah.
And it comes after protests, comes after beach trips by kids, it comes by after stuff like that. So we still have to be extraordinarily careful. Okay, back to our subject.
Alrighty.
Back to our subject. From Becca came this question. And this was interesting to me because I hadn't even thought of this, which, that's part of our problem is we just we have no idea. So if we don't ask these questions, how are we going to know? She said, what advice would you give to white mothers of black children? Okay,
well, I'm glad you asked. Well, I think it's very important to make sure they know where they come from. I actually have a friend I went to nursing school with, and I love her to death. She adopted 2 African American boys, and she said she want to make sure they know, their Black history, and and explain to them the differences and about racism. And I applaud her. She's so awesome, and she want them to know what's going on, and not kind of, because some people think, oh well, I'm just gonna not say anything as protection, but sometimes that can be a hindrance because if they don't know, So I think it's important that you be real and let them know what's really going on.
Because there is a culture.
Yes.
There is a black culture. There is a white culture. There is a Hispanic culture. Everybody has a culture. Right. And I think one of the things that I don't know, you can agree with this or disagree, but one of the things I think we have to do is we have to appreciate one another's cultures.
That's right.
I don't need to expect you to abandon your culture and become a part of mine. And there is no way that I can there's no problem about it. There's no way I can totally understand your culture enough that I'm really ever going to be in your culture. And
right.
So I think we all have to be proud of our cultures and appreciate that pride in another person and their culture.
And that's what I was kind of saying as far as when people would say, well, I don't see a color. It's important that you do see me as an African American. I want you to understand, where I come from, and I want to understand where you come from. That's the only way that we'll be able to understand each other. And like I said, it goes across the board, not just black and white, but, with Hispanics and, Asian. We need to know across the board because, America is known as this melting pot, And if are we really a melting pot if we're not really actually getting to know one another? Like, we need to be comfortable enough to be able to share those things, especially with you being my sister in Christ. if I'm going through something, I would hope that she would get to know me. So if something is going on, okay, something's not right about you, let me check on my sister, you know. So it's important that we do that across the board.
And how do we kind of check in with you, and how do we be concerned?
Yes.
And yet that not be a burden to you.
Okay, so I'm going to say off the bat, it's not a burden. It's actually, I'm going to give you an example, and I'm glad that Rebecca actually suggested questions. And like I said, I didn't see the video of Mr. Floyd. I couldn't do it. But what got me was when they said that he called out for his deceased mother. That hurt me so bad into my core that I just shut down. And the post, and I couldn't deal with it. And she texted me out the blue. She said, Tia, I just wanted to check on you. I hope I'm not a burden. I'm praying for you. Is there something I can do? And don't you know, that made my day. And it actually made me cry because I was feeling so burdened. And it was like such a relief that, you know, she reached out to me to check on me because I wasn't expecting that. I try not to cry. But it was such a blessing that my white sister in Christ is checking on me and asking what could she do. And that was so awesome. So to answer that, you know, sometimes when we are explaining things or whatnot, they don't really hear us. But if you actually talk to us and we conversate and you use your voice, sometimes it's actually going to be received because it's coming from my white sisters and brothers. So just being the voice for us, we need you guys more than ever, you know. So I think that's important. So don't think that is a burden. We want you guys to reach out, and I'm so glad that y'all are doing this.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Don't you love her honesty? I'm just so glad that we can just kind of really talk about this stuff and not pretend that everything is just okey doke and kind of just kind of gloss it over. Yeah. You know, which I think is probably what's happened. Yeah. A lot in the
on
past.
Both sides.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As we look at the way things are in our country and in our community, and my question, I guess, to you then is, what policies or what do you see that needs to be different?
Yeah. To be honest, because it's funny that me and my brother was actually talking about this. You know, they've been putting a lot of stuff in place, and yes, some things are getting better, but this is more of a heart issue. It really is. It's more of a heart issue, and it doesn't matter if there's like policies in place. It may improve, but it's mostly a heart issue, and it's going to take us as Christians just to keep on praying and trusting in God, you know, for them to have a change of heart, and that's just my take on it as far as that. I mean, I really just believe it's a heart issue. Yeah.
The white church has not historically been the leader, and that has always seemed strange to me, because I'm just thinking, as followers of Christ, we need to be the leaders. Right. And if we are followers of Christ and people look at us and they see a reflection in us of what is generally and socially accepted, right, as an okay behavior, then we're not really shining the light, right, as we talk about it. So it's important for us, I think, both of us, right, to speak up. That's right. And to say, you know, this is just not right. I think that's the thing that bothered me most of all about the George Floyd thing. Somebody was taking the video. How come that person didn't say or try to stop them? Or, you know, there had to be people standing around watching this happen. Why wouldn't somebody say, this is not right?
Yeah. And a lot of things, and I could say that for the Black community, like, I believe it was a young girl that recorded that video. She was, I think, 16, 17. And with us, with the history as far as police and things of that nature, they were afraid that they could have possibly get killed too. And that's just the reality of it. They didn't step in for that reason. Because that was my question. Like, if that was my child, I want somebody to stop them. I want them, but their reality is, if I go in, I could possibly get hurt too.
Absolutely.
And it shouldn't be that way. And I hate the fact that they're just recording, but that's just the reality. They're afraid too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, if you had been a white person standing around, this is interesting because if a white person had attempted to intervene, it would have been very different than if a black person had tried to intervene, and that should not be the case.
Right.
If an injustice is being done, whoever intervenes should be respected.
Right.
And they may not be able to stop anything, or they may not be able to change anything in that very moment, but just the fact. I mean, if you had seen in that frame, if you had seen a white person step in and say, "You guys, you shouldn't be doing this. Right. He needs to be able to breathe." If that had happened, even if they gone ahead and done what they didn't need to be doing,
right.
even then, there would have been a change in attitude about the whole thing.
Right.
So, what do you have that you'd like to ask me? Is there anything that you?
Actually, we've already like you had it packed. I mean, I'm impressed. Like, I actually wanted to know what was your perspective of like the things that's going on. And I know you were saying as far as your grandkids, you want to make sure they're protected, but I mean, what is your perspective as far as the things that's going on after the incident happened?
As followers of Christ, we know that violence is not the answer. I'm really distressed by the fact that the looting and all that sort of stuff and the burning, what good does it possibly do to burn down Wendy's, And yet, by the same token, I understand because there's such a history and there's so much anger. Yeah. And anger feeds anger. So if you're going to get a bunch of people together who are really angry, then probably bad things are going to happen. So while I understand it, I wish it hadn't happened. Yeah. Because what concerns me is, and I don't know, you can speak to this. Is that going to make it worse instead of better? Is that going to make white people more uncomfortable, more frightened if they're in that category or whatever? What is that? What is that going to do? Right. I don't see I don't know, and this is absolutely my perspective. Yeah. I don't attempt, as you don't, to speak for every black or white person in the world. But what I don't understand is how that's possibly going to move anything forward.
And like you were saying, I think it's a lot of frustration of not, I'm telling you this is happening. I'm telling you that this is happening, and you're not hearing me. And so now you see these people that are acting out. And the ones that are acting out, they may not be in a situation where they have God to rely on. And that's just what it is. When we have us being in Christ, we know that when we have our issues or whatnot, we turn to God for that. And, sometimes, and this is just my opinion, I think that it's just frustration of, I'm telling you what's going on and this is not happening. And that's why they're acting out. Do I agree with it? No, I don't agree with it. And I hate that it's happening because I feel like it's causing more of a divide. But I think that's what it was really going on. It's just frustration.
Well, and I think we can see a comparable kind of thing in our own lives. Maybe in your relationship with your husband or your kids. You say something, and you say something, and you say something, and you say something, and you think, how can they not have heard what I said? And so your next step then, you get angry with your kids.
Oh, you heard my conversation with Josh. Take out the trash.
And That's human nature,
Yeah.
but what we got to do is fight human nature
Right.
and try to take on another nature
That's right.
entirely. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I've really enjoyed this.
I enjoyed it too.
I hope that this has been meaningful for you. That was our hope.
Mm-hmm.
And so just talk to each other on a very basic level and make it clear. And one of the things I told her, I said, you know, if I say something that is just really way out of line, you call me out. And I think we have to do it on that basis. Just, you know, say, wait, just a minute. I don't think I understand. Let's go back and take another look at that.
Oh yeah, and it's important that we start tearing down those walls, because I mean, if we actually really want to get down to it, then we really gonna have to just have that conversation. And I appreciate you inviting me. I was so excited whenever Chris had mentioned it to me, and then when you asked. So, I mean, I'm glad to be here to talk to you about it, and it really has made my day, and it gives me hope that, you know, hopefully one day we can all just come together and actually find that common ground with everybody and continue to be the light to show how to respond to these situations.
Couldn't possibly have closed out any better at all. I do have one request. Would you pray with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Would you lead it?
Sure.
Okay.
Dear righteous Heavenly Father, we come to you at this time. Thank you for all the wonderful blessings that you bestowed upon us. Dear Lord, I just thank you for blessing me and Sister Marsha to come together and be able to have this uncomfortable conversation, to be able to start to try to have the unity amongst our church and our churches and community. And we're just asking that you just continue to be with our families, protect them, keep a hedge of protection around all of us. And just asking that you just continue to help us, that we can talk to individuals to open their hearts for understanding.
Thank you. Well, as Scott usually closes, he usually says, grace and peace.